Hi, welcome everybody to the final session of the first ever New Jersey Trails and Greenways Summit. My name is Leanne Von Hagen, and I'm the Managing Director of the Voorhees Transportation Center at the Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. And this is where we also house the New Jersey Safe Routes Resource Center and the New Jersey Bicycle and Pedestrian Resource Center.
And my name is Sonia Strensna. I'm the Director of Active Transportation at the Tri-State Transportation Campaign, and I also serve as the New Jersey Vice Chair of the Circuit Trails Coalition. Over the past 2 days, I've been blown away by many of the speakers who presented about their experiences building trails and greenways all over the state. Leanne and I have been working behind the scenes in partnership with NJDOT and NJDEP to pull together the many panel speakers and keynotes for our online sessions. We began this summit with a welcome from our esteemed colleagues, Elise Bremer-Nye at New Jersey Department of Transportation and Brandy Chapman at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, who outlined what was in store for this summit. Now it's our turn to wrap up this event and let you know what's in store next. Leanne, does that make us the B team?
So, yes, but if B stands for bold, beautiful, and brilliant, then absolutely it makes us the B team. Sonia, I've also been blown away by the many thoughtful and engaging comments from all of our attendees. So we had over 530 people register for this conference, which they came from all over the state. And I really see that as a testament to how important trails and greenways are to so many people in New Jersey. This response was really overwhelming, and it's been absolutely fantastic.
Well, the conversation won't end with this final session. There will still be one more session after this that you could tune into about how we can keep this conversation going statewide. But right now, let's reflect on who we've heard from and what we've learned in the past 2 days. One of my aha moments during this summit was when Mishka Mitchell spoke about why we need to look at everything holistically. Building trails should be an active process with the community that strengthens it. And it's important for trail advocates to keep issues like gentrification in mind and work with others in the community to ensure truly equitable access to trails.
Yeah, that's totally a good point. And likewise, some of the things I walked away with is thinking about our trails without the greater transportation context. We definitely want to include the holistic environment, like what I learned today at your session, Sonia, about trails, transit, and complete streets, which reminds me about speaking about complete streets. Next month on Friday, October 2nd, Rutgers, in partnership with the New Jersey Department of Transportation, is hosting our next summit, the Complete Streets Summit, where we'll be celebrating 10+ years of complete streets and complete and green streets in New Jersey. And you can register at www.completestreets2021.com. Thank you for letting me plug that, Sonia.
Yeah, and we'll put the link in the chat for everyone to get it. But yeah, we've been talking about one of our biggest takeaways is that this is not the end of the summit, but the beginning of a larger conversation about how all of us, no matter who we are and where we come from, have a role to play in building more vibrant and resilient communities through trails and greenways where everyone feels welcome and included.
And, you know, we were talking earlier how much we'd like to use this summit as a catalyst for continuing the conversation with all of you who attended. And we are so thankful that you joined us, and we really just can't wait to help build what's next.
We have to give a huge shout out to New Jersey DEP and New Jersey DOT for sponsoring such a wonderful event. And of course to you, Leanne, and the staff of the Voorhees Transportation Center, Civic Eye Collaborative, and NV5 for putting this event together and walking us through the trials and tribulations of an online conference.
And really, Sonia, I have got to thank you and all the members of the Summit Planning Committee for crafting the whole vision for this summit. We really had a fantastic mix of government and non-governmental organizations in the planning committee, and I really do want to give this shout out. So some of those who helped us included the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia, the Circuit Trails Coalition, East Coast Greenway Alliance, Lawrence Hopewell Trail, New Jersey Walk and Bike Coalition, New Jersey Conservation Foundation, and of course, Tri-State Transportation Campaign.
And we also have the support of our partners, New Jersey Department of Transportation and New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, in addition to New Jersey Department of Travel and Tourism, who you all heard from today, Monmouth County Park System, as well as the New Jersey Trails Council.
So Sonia, how are we going to stay in touch?
So the New Jersey Trails Action Network will be an opportunity for us all to do that. We'll be able to share stories and learn from each other's experiences in creating trails throughout the state. We really hope this network can help create a statewide vision for trails in New Jersey. If you're interested in being part of that, join us for the extra session at 5:30 called Keeping the Conversation Going. But without further ado, it's time to hear our next two speakers from DOT and DEP to help round us out.
Yeah, so I am really excited because I have the honor of introducing our next speaker, Michael Russo, who has been the Assistant Commissioner of Planning, Multimodal, and Grant Administration since 2017. He's also responsible for the divisions of statewide planning, multimodal services, local aid and economic development, and environmental resources. Prior to becoming Assistant Commissioner, Mike Russo was the Director of Local Aid and Economic Development, and he has 38 years experience with the New Jersey Department of Transportation, which is really fantastic. So please take it away, Mike.
All right, thank you, Leanne. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you found New Jersey's inaugural Trails and Greenways Summit to be as informative and as enjoyable as I did. I'd like to thank my staff at NJDOT, our sister agency at New Jersey DEP, and the numerous members of the Summit Planning Committee for their hard work in making this summit happen. A lot has been accomplished by the summit team, its moderators, and session presenters in the 3 short months since we first announced the summit. It was a Herculean effort, and I applaud you for it. It's safe to say that because of you, this summit has been a huge success. There were so many fantastic panels and presentations these past 2 days, beginning with the inspiring welcome remarks by our commissioners Diane Gutierrez-Scacchetti and Sean LaTourette, and continuing with the keynote by Mishka Mitchell, who shared her own personal perspective and insights on the city of Camden. After hearing Mishka's keynote, I knew immediately we were on track for a very successful summit. Elisa Brummer and I, DOT's bicycle and pedestrian coordinator, presented on the Delaware River Heritage Trail in the first session, which is a great example of what can be accomplished if you have a vision and are persistent. The Heritage Trail Route 130 bypass project exemplifies this, and it is the kind of work we at DOT are hoping to be part of more in the coming years. Likewise, in the funding panel, Lane Rankin, our Director of Local Aid and Economic Development, discussed the numerous state and federal funding opportunities that exist through DOT, as well as the flexibility that exists in programs such as municipal aid that allows communities to fund bicycle and pedestrian projects and not just resurfacing projects. Our goal is to encourage more communities to break from tradition and use municipal aid funds for non-traditional projects, which hopefully leads to many more bicycle, pedestrian, and complete street projects throughout the state. I'm grateful for the presentations from Renee Reynolds, Executive Director of the Tri-State Transportation Campaign, who provided a really eye-opening look into the importance of ensuring that our transportation network is accessible to all. On the topic of promoting equitable access and connecting our residents with all trails our state has to offer, Brandy Chapman, DEP's State Trails Coordinator, presented on her agency's groundbreaking initiative to map all of New Jersey's trails, highlighting in particular the potential for this kind of effort to assist with search and rescue operations in trail planning. Connecting our state's complex network of transportation options has immense benefits for communities and their residents. Paul Gleitz of the Monmouth County Park System discussed efforts to connect the Henry Hudson Trail to transit and showcase the ways in which trails can be linked to other transportation systems to the benefit of both. Mayor Jonathan Bush of Metuchen spoke on the transformative effects the Middlesex Greenway has had on his community, citing the Greenway as an essential public asset that has benefited residents and drawn businesses and visitors to Metuchen. Several presenters stressed the importance of collaboration, engaging local officials, and being an advocate within your community for trail projects. As the previous director of local aid, I was invited to participate in a discussion in Ocean County to explore funding options for the Union Transportation Trail. The meeting involved multiple agencies and representatives from multiple counties and municipalities. That one meeting inspired the creation of NJDOT's Regional Transportation Alternatives Program with a focus on funding regionally significant projects. The program subsequently funded the Delaware River Heritage Trail Route 130 bypass and several of the other success stories highlighted here over the past 2 days. The department continues to encourage this type of collaboration and support through its commitment to communities initiatives and works directly with counties and municipalities through the Local Aid Resource Center in helping them secure funding and advance projects that improve biking and walking. Our Division of Local Aid administers $430 million annually in state-funded grants and another $100 million in federal funds, including many programs dedicated solely to projects that improve opportunities for people to bike and walk. As noted by the commissioner in her opening remarks, DOT has invested more than $140 million in multi-use trail projects throughout the state in the past decade alone. We have a state-funded bikeways program and a Safe Streets to Transit program that will each award $1 million in FY22. Our federal aid Safe Routes to School program will select and award over $10 million in safety projects in FY22. And our Transportation Alternatives program recently awarded $11.7 million for the construction of sidewalks, bike paths, and traffic calming improvements. It has been just over 10 years since the department adopted our nationally recognized and award-winning Complete Streets policy to help ensure our roads serve the needs of all users of the state's transportation network. Since then, the department has supported counties and municipalities in developing their own policies and implementation plans through Complete Streets training and workshops across the state. We have sponsored a Complete Streets Summit every other year, and have recognized many of those who have championed and implemented complete streets in their communities. And speaking of that, as Leanne had noted, I would also like to provide a shameless plug for our next Complete Streets Summit on October 22nd. Since 2009, 169 towns and 8 counties have passed their own complete streets policies to make local roads safe for those who bike and walk. In 2019, we released the Complete and Green Streets Model Policy and Guide as a resource for counties and municipalities. It includes the latest and the best national trends in policy and incorporates ways to manage water to improve the environment and reduce flooding. It prioritizes health, equity, and fairness in transportation expenditures and on-the-ground projects. We have distributed this model policy and guide far and wide, and we anticipate it will be instrumental in advancing complete streets on all New Jersey roads, making them safer for everyone. The department's #1 priority is to improve safety for all, including our most vulnerable road users, and especially our children, seniors, people with disabilities, overburdened communities, and those who live in areas not well served by transportation options. This is why when we worked to update New Jersey's Strategic Highway Safety Plan, it was a collaborative effort with a broad group of stakeholders, including state, regional, county, and municipal governments, academia, law enforcement, engineers, planners, nonprofit organizations, advocacy groups, and private sector partners. New Jersey's vision is to achieve 0 deaths on all public roads. This year, one of our strategies is to focus on the interconnections between our transportation networks with consideration given to things like mid-block trail crossings. We are working hand in hand with trail advocates through events like this summit with the goal of increasing access to off-street routes for bicyclists and pedestrians. Moving towards 0 deaths is an achievable goal, but it requires time to change attitudes and behaviors and to realize the benefits of the physical improvements and upgrades being made to our transportation network. I thank you all for your time and dedication in continuing to implement and improve safe and sustainable ways for New Jerseyans to get around our great state. And I am grateful for your attendance at the inaugural New Jersey Trails and Greenways Summit and the work you all do to support this vision. And lastly, I would like to thank DEP Deputy Commissioner Olivia Glenn for her personal involvement in support of this summit. I hope to see you all at the Complete Streets Summit on October 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner Mike Russo. And now I'm really excited to introduce Deputy Commissioner Olivia Glenn. Olivia is responsible for prioritizing the advancement of the administration's environmental justice and equity goals. Olivia previously headed the DEP's Division of Parks and Forestry and also led education, outreach, and land management efforts for the DEP's Environmental Justice Advisory Council. A longtime advocate of ensuring underserved communities have access to the outdoors, she has played an invaluable role in advancing equitable access to trails, including those in the Circuit Trails Network, and in developing the Complete and Green Streets policy. She has been a great leader in our state, and it's always been a pleasure to work with her. Take it away, Deputy Commissioner.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Sonia. And good afternoon to all. I am Olivia Glenn, the Deputy Commissioner for Environmental Justice and Equity at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. It is indeed my pleasure to be here, joined by my colleague, Assistant Commissioner Mike Russo, to offer closing remarks for our inaugural New Jersey Trails and Greenways Summit. I'd like to thank each of you in the audience who have participated over these past 2 days. For indeed, without each of you, our hands would be heavy with the work. We are delighted to have each of you join our efforts to further greenways and trails in our state. I want to thank my staff at NJDEP, our sister department NJDOT, and the Summit Planning Committee for their hard work in making this event happen. There were so many fantastic panels these past 2 days. Elizabeth Dragon, the Assistant Commissioner of DEP's new Office of Community and Economic Development, educated us on the connection between the environment and fostering a thriving economy. Candace Perry, our new Director of the Office of Environmental Justice, highlighted the importance of green infrastructure and promoting environmental justice initiatives within New Jersey's core functions. Brandy Chapman, DEP's State Trails Coordinator, showed us how statewide trail mapping can help make a statewide network of trails a reality. And she also showed us how everyone can get involved with trail development. From a land manager standpoint to initiating grassroots efforts on an individual level. Josh Osowski, Northern Regional Superintendent of DEP's State Park Service, shared some insights on connecting DEP's long distance trails to local trails to create regional trail networks. Doug Calm, also of DEP's State Park Service, gave us a demonstration of the State Park Service's Trail Tracker app, which helps residents tailor a recreation experience based on varying abilities, modalities, and trail features. I also want to note that this summit would not have been possible without the efforts of key partners like Sonia Shachesna of Tri-State Transportation Campaign, Brandy Chapman of the DEP, Elise Bremer-Nye of NJDOT, and Leanne Von Hagen of Rutgers Voorhees Transportation Center. If you know each of these ladies, you know that they can make anything possible, which is why this summit happened and why it has been such a tremendous success. DEP's Recreational Trails Program has helped a multitude of trails and greenways efforts get off the ground, fill in key trail gaps, and assist with the stewardship of our trail and greenways networks in New Jersey. Since its inception in 1993, the Recreational Trails Program has provided over $23 million in finance to assist over 970 trail construction and improvement projects in New Jersey. These grants have helped instill a sense of ownership and a passion for outdoor conservation in young adults and teens by supporting the work of youth core groups throughout the state. The grants have helped local governments and nonprofits enhance and grow their trail and greenway networks by providing financial support for wayfinding, improved access, and filling in key gaps for the development of long-distance trail and greenway networks. Recently, funds have been used for statewide priorities such as this summit and the much-needed, long-anticipated State Trails Geodatabase. Every year, DEP's Green Acres program gets funding requests for trail and greenway development projects. This year alone, Green Acres received over $300 million in funding requests for acquisition, stewardship, and park development projects. So we know there is a strong demand to meet the public's open space and recreation needs. In addition, DEP's Division of Parks and Forestry maintains over 1,100 miles of public trails throughout New Jersey for a range of user types, abilities, and ages. Explore some of the trails using the State Park Service Trail Tracker app, which was live demonstrated by Doug Halm of New Jersey State Park Service during this summit. Coupled with these extraordinary efforts over the last several decades, we are at a unique moment in time to consider how we advance this work from a lens of environmental justice and equity. Trails have always largely considered access for all, and this is an opportunity to refine that focus, to ensure that our efforts in the nation's fourth most diverse state, the Great Garden State, truly engage those in every corner of New Jersey. From my lens of advancing environmental justice and equity at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, a priority of both Governor Murphy and DEP Commissioner LaTourette, I know that trails can be a tangible action that can be taken by state government agencies and our partners to further the promise of environmental justice. While the creation of the interstate highway system in the past century simultaneously brought us together, it also created sustained pockets of bifurcation and isolation, most notably in our poorest communities and communities of color. The same communities that have large numbers of carless households and experience the highest exposures to inhaled pollution from mobile transportation sources. Today, with the building of trail networks, we have the opportunity to restore and recalibrate. We can build trails of all scopes and sizes, coordinate our efforts, and further trail networks, which will only increase our connectedness to each other and the communities that we serve. Collectively, this will result in advancing justice, equity, and inclusion simultaneously. And these connections can happen in reaching places near and far. Yesterday's summit launched with opening keynote remarks from Mishka Mitchell from Camden Community Partnership. We are both natives of the great city of Camden, New Jersey, and we have known each other pretty much all of our lives. She noted that those disconnects can be improved within a community that doesn't even know it has a waterway 4 blocks from where someone has lived for decades. Or also give them connections to more distant places, all while safely traversing a trail segment that we've planned to serve all levels of users from all ages, races, socioeconomic backgrounds, and all levels of physical ability. Looking ahead, I look forward to how we will work collectively to update the 2009 New Jersey Trails Plan, launch the geodatabase of state trails, work with trail planners and the New Jersey Trails Council to identify trail gaps, prioritize acquisitions, and create areas of focus for New Jersey, like creating a list of top 10 trail priorities and advancing the goal of having a trail within 10 minutes of every New Jersey resident. In concert with the DEP Office of Environmental Justice's GIS layer, this statewide trails mapping can help promote environmental justice initiatives by targeting funding and focusing enhancement and development efforts in our overburdened communities. After we hear Amy Camp's presentation and you wrap up with Sonia this evening, this is definitely not a farewell, but a see you soon. We have lots of work to continue to do. Thanks again to all, most notably to the event planners, my colleague Mike Russo, and to everyone at DEP and DOT who made this wonderful event possible. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Olivia, for joining us. It's always a pleasure to see you. And thanks to, yes, thanks. And thanks for the praise too. That was, you made me tear up a little. And thank you for both state agencies for everything you're doing to make this a great state to enjoy trails and greenways in. Really was nice to highlight the work from both state agencies over these past 2 days. So thank you so much. So on that note, I get to do something I'm beyond thrilled about because I get to introduce our closing keynote discussion and turn the next part of this session over to Laura Torchio to moderate. And let me just tell you a little something about Laura. She's not only a seasoned facilitator with a skill to inspire thoughtful, creative initiatives and coalitions that strengthen the vitality of communities, but really she's a true champion in New Jersey, an expert planner who's been working in all areas of the state to create safe, accessible, healthy, equitable, engaging places where people can walk and bicycle. So Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you because I know we're in great hands and I can't wait to hear what Amy has to say. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Now I'm going to do the ugly cry too. Thanks a lot, Leanne. No, that was really nice. Thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Laura Torchio. I'm a creative placemaker and principal of Laura Torchio LLC, a woman-owned consultancy focused on working with communities to shape public spaces that foster civic life, belonging, and well-being. I've worn many hats over the years, and I've been most inspired by people first public spaces and active transportation planning. And this first New Jersey Trails and Greenways Summit really addressed those things for me. So I was jazzed over the last 2 days. From planning to funding yesterday to today's hot topics on transforming towns through trails, we all agree that people are the priority. So I want to give a big shout out to the sponsors, the Departments of Transportation and Environmental Protection, the many organizations who helped to plan this summit, and our esteemed hosts at VTC, Civic Eye, and NV5. When I first signed on, I was a little skeptical. I was like, another Zoom conference, but this one really blew me away. I have enjoyed all the presentations, and I'm so jazzed that 2 big departments are breaking down their silos to work together and really take giant leaps to move the trails program forward in the state, not just for recreation, but also for transportation. It's really wonderful. And those of you who have known me over the years know that I like to say, you know, in order to get stuff done, there's no they. There's no Complete Streets Ferry. There's no Trails Ferry. There's no Environmental Justice and Equity Ferry. There's just us. We are they. And from this conference and the things that we've been talking about, I am confident that we are getting stuff done. So big thank you to everyone. What an honor it is for me to introduce our closing keynote speaker, Amy Camp. Amy and I met in 2017 on a 6-seater queasy prop plane traveling from Boise to a small rural town tucked away in the Rocky Mountains called Salmon, Idaho. Salmon is a hunting, fishing, and outdoor recreation gateway on the edge of something called No Return Wilderness. It hosts a portion of the Lewis and Clark Trail and is known as the birthplace of Sacagawea. Amy and I were on a Citizens Institute for Rural Design team tasked with placemaking and wayfinding to get tourists out of that wilderness and into the small town for some hospitality and to spend their money. Anyway, our shiny, snazzy urban team from New York City, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh were eager to share our expertise with this community, but they were a little bit closed off. We were qualified and prepared and invited, but we were still outsiders. They wanted us there, but they didn't quite trust us yet. And this is where the magic happened. Amy sensed the vibe in the room and pivoted. She took off her trails expert hat, she put on her coach hat, and within minutes, I watched Amy transform her audience from a group of closed off, arms crossed skeptics to engaged, leaning in, eager contributors. Amy's passion, knowledge, and empathy is her magic potion. And I know not all of you know Amy. To you, she might be an outsider, but I promise you, by the end of her talk, you'll feel like you're lifelong friends. No pressure, Amy. I know, I also know Salmon, Idaho is not New Jersey. There are obvious differences between trails in rural areas of the Continental Divide and trails in the nation's most densely populated state. But one thing that is the same is people. People in Salmon, Idaho, and throughout New Jersey want to be seen, heard, respected, and understood. I learned so much from Amy on that trip, particularly how trust is the most important ingredient. I also learned the skill, the radical skill of pivoting on a dime, which sure came in handy as we all saw the critical role of public spaces and trails during the global COVID pandemic. Amy Camp, owner of Cycle Forward, is a trails and tourism consultant, a placemaker, and a certified coach. She helped to launch the nationally recognized Trail Town program in 2007, and now consults communities on how they can rethink trails and tourism. Today, Amy will speak a little bit about her new book, Deciding on Trails, COVID's impact on trails, and how it all relates to our trails and greenway goals in New Jersey. Amy is an expert at putting people first, no matter what hat she's wearing. And if you find yourself in Pittsburgh, she might just join you for a Primanti Brothers famous fries and slaw sandwich. Everyone, please welcome my good friend, Amy Camp.
Wow, Laura, that is just about the warmest and most enjoyable introduction, and I really am grateful to you for it. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And want to thank everyone for having me here. I believe this connection was made through Laura initially. And by the way, I am always learning from you as well. And thank you as well as to Leanne and Sonia, the state agencies, and everyone else who have made this happen. This is really an honor to be a part of your first time State Trails and Greenways Summit. So way to go, everyone. So I am going to talk a little bit today, as Laura said, about trail towns and COVID's impact on trails, and how communities can move forward together in what has been an uncertain time. So this is a screenshot of my new website. I just launched it last week, so I'm at that stage where I'm excited about it and trying to show it to everybody. So if you could visit cycleforward.org, I would appreciate you going there, taking 30 seconds to sign up for my newsletter. The things that I like to talk about in my newsletter are trails, placemaking, and the wonder of nature. So if that is, if those are things that sound exciting to you, please let's be in touch in that manner. But I am a placemaker, and my history professionally is in marketing places, and I came to trails by way of placemaking. I worked in community development for the first many years of my career, and then had the chance to start to work along a long distance destination trail called the Great Allegheny Passage, which is in Western Pennsylvania and Western Maryland. And we initiated a program called Trail Town Program. So I'm going to talk about that today and how that program has been used in other places around the country, as well as now in Canada. But I'd like to start first with Hamilton. I am going to guess there are some Hamilton fans here. And if you are familiar with the song about the Battle of Yorktown. And the song about the battle, which was, if not the most instrumental battle of the Revolutionary War, was one of them. It's the battle that ultimately ended the war. And if you know that song, you know that the tempo of the song is really upbeat, and it's building like how a battle would. And then near the end, after the battle has ended, there is the song quiets down, and the ensemble sings "The World Turned Upside Down," and they repeat it: "The world turned upside down, the world turned upside down." If I could carry a tune, I would sing it for you, but I can't. But I've thought a lot about that refrain over the last 18 months. See, in the song, the world turning upside down was representative of one of the world's greatest global power had lost a major battle and was soon to lose the war, and America was to gain its independence. And for some reason that refrain has been in my head during the pandemic, because our world has turned upside down over the past 18 months. In fact, I was at a conference the other day, and I heard somebody, just as I was passing by, I heard somebody say, our lives were turned upside down. And I didn't even need any context. I knew that he was talking about COVID. And I don't have to remind you of all of the different ways that life changed for us in March of 2020 and continue to be different. But I can tell you that one thing that we did have was trails and access to nature for those of us that were lucky enough to be able to get to trails and to get to nature. So that was something that resulted, of course, in a mass return to the outdoors. Even so, people didn't know, especially early on, is it okay to go outside? We didn't know how close we could be to people while outside. We didn't know how long our air droplets stayed in the air while we were biking or walking or running. And so it's no wonder we had articles titled like this, is it okay to take a walk? And I'm not saying, making any kind of political point or anything. I'm just saying that our lives changed a lot last year. And we were lucky enough to have trails as they did. So I wanted to just take a little bit of time to share a little bit about COVID's impact on trails, particularly in Pennsylvania. But I think what I found whenever I was researching this last year is that a lot of what was happening in Pennsylvania was happening all around the country. So I'm sort of guessing that, this will seem familiar to you. So I was engaged by the Pennsylvania Environmental Council to do some research in the spring of last year. And then I was, brought back in the fall to do some additional research. We initially wanted to understand what was happening on trails in March and April of 2020. And then by later in the year, we wanted to know, well, what happened all season long? So if you're really interested in this topic, you can go to my website where I have both of the reports. But what we did was we talked to trail managers. They were our primary source. We wanted to talk to the people who were closest to trails and what was happening with them at the time. And these are the kinds of things we were hearing. The trail is busy all the time, every day. And every day is like a weekend day now. Whether you considered this to be a good thing depended upon probably your location in the state, what type of trail you have, and your organization's capacity to manage all of this change and the increased use. But these are the things we were hearing. We were hearing stories about overflowing parking lots and garbage cans and illegal uses and just lost revenues, really, really busy increase and difficult time to be managing trails. The numbers back what we were hearing anecdotally from the trail managers. This is from the Rails to Trails Conservancy, and they saw, I think, a 200% increase in the first couple of months of the pandemic over the previous year, and throughout the entire year, about a 50% increase. So this is using trail counters, electronic trail counters that are placed all around the country. Here in Pennsylvania, we saw pretty similar increases. And even though, in a sense, it's what we've always wanted in trails, is more people coming to trails and enjoying them, of course, it was a tough year to be managing trails. And these were some of the kinds of things that were happening. I don't think I even really have to tell you, but there were issues around overuse and crowding, the damage that can do to natural surface trails, for example, the inability to keep up, trip cancellations for people who were planning long distance cycling and hikes, these people were being encouraged to cancel their trips. Record low lodging, losses in lodging and sales tax revenues, restaurants having trouble keeping up, trail closings. The Appalachian Trail was closed for a period last year. People were recommended not to use it. There were all kinds of challenges taking place. At the same time, managers around the state of Pennsylvania perceived the changes in trail use to be mostly positive. And if you, I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with the state. You know, we have some really urbanized areas, and we have suburban and a lot of rural. And if you were in a rural area, you weren't necessarily experiencing that pain of overly crowded trails. It was just, for a lot of people in rural Pennsylvania, it was a pleasant increase in trail use. A lot of that increase by local residents who suddenly, most of them, or a lot of them, had the time to go outside and to use trails as a positive outlet. As for the a couple of other perception questions we asked of those managers, 80% of them noted a change in trail user demographics. Again, everything we've always wanted. And 90% said that trails were being used and perceived as positive outlets in their communities. So it's not simple, though. There are a lot of nuances, and there's a lot still to be understood. Headlines like this: thinking of buying a bike, get ready for a long wait. It was a record year for a lot of bike shops. Bikes, you know, in Pennsylvania were declared, bike shops were declared essential businesses because bikes are a form of transportation. And just as bike shops were as busy as they could ever be, there were other trail serving businesses that were really struggling. B&Bs, trailside cafes, shuttling services, these kinds of businesses located along some of our longer destination trails, they were having a hard time. So I just wanted to give you a flavor for what was happening there. If that really interests you, again, you can go see the studies. And I will say, if you know there's anything that I want you to remember from that section, it's that as great as the increases in trail use were, this has been a challenging time to manage trails, and support for trails is needed now more than ever. One way I think there is to support trails is for communities to adopt a trail town mentality. And I'd like to talk a little bit about this idea of trail towns. This is what Laura was referring to. What, you know, really the majority of the work I do has to do with helping trail communities to better understand the benefits of trails, why they would want to have them, and how they can better connect to them. This is the realm of trail towns. So the definition, I always hate to read definitions, but I think it's important that we're all on the same page here. A trail town is a community through which a trail passes that supports trail users with services, promotes the trail to its residents, and embraces the trail as a resource to be protected and celebrated. If you're looking at the pyramid, you could think of it this way. It's a town along a trail that at some level embraces that trail, and there's a trail economy that springs up in support of it. And that very bottom part of the pyramid is what I think is the most important part. The trail becomes an integral part of the community's identity. There is, I think there's the need for communities to celebrate and invest in trails, and it's a decision point. They can decide whether or not to do that, but when they do, and when there's a pride of place and a pride in being located along a trail, or even if you don't have a long distance trail, just a pride in all of the different trails and, you know, outdoor recreation amenities that you do have, that's the best of trail towns. Another way of thinking of it is, I heard someone once say, to be a trail town is to make the decision to pay attention to trails. This is a bridge in Iowa along the High Trestle Trail. This is the High Trestle Trail Bridge. And they could have put any bridge there to span that amazing river valley in this small little town, but instead they did an epic work of art. And it's amazing. to see that bridge by day, and they also light it by night. So it's really something that has taken a 24-mile trail and made it a destination. And when I talk about communities deciding on trails, if you're looking at the photo to the right, you can see what they did in mimicking the bridge arches. That's, you know, signage to direct people into town. And they did something to honor that bridge. They made the decision to pay attention to trails. So trail towns are all around the country and now in Canada. There are, this is a graphic from my book. So this is just, you know, to the best of my knowledge, there's a trail town or a gateway community presence in at least 28 states, as well as the province of Ontario. And it all started in Pennsylvania on the Great Allegheny Passage. So I was a part of the staff that implemented the Trail Town program along this 150-mile rail trail in Western Pennsylvania and Western Maryland. It was inspired by Main Street. The idea was to try to help revitalize rural post-industrial communities that were along the trail, but not fully connecting to it, not really understanding trail users, and missing out on a whole lot of opportunity. I'm not going to go bullet by bullet on this, but you know, it was a regional program. We were doing economic development, we were doing community development. We had a lending program through the Progress Fund, which was my employer, and we were also doing infrastructure. We were doing brand development. We were basically promoting and doing community development at a regional level, and it was all built around a linear rail trail. We considered it to be a rural, regional approach to rural economic development. I love this photo on the right because not everyone who's doing a long distance trail is doing a multi-day trip where they're trying to travel light. I had a group in from Canada, and you can see from all of the jams and apple butters that this woman was buying that, you know, we were not pedaling long distances, but it reminds me that all sorts of different people use trails in all sorts of ways. As for the program on the Great Allegheny Passage, we did measure the economic impact of that trail over the years. And you can see there was a pretty significant increase over the years as, you know, different portions of the trail were completed. And as we, you know, created our program to help communities to better understand and better connect to that system. There has been a new study that's not yet been released, almost a decade since the last research, that suggests a pretty significant jump even from here. So what happened with trail towns after we started our program is that other trail advocates in other places started to take notice of the program and you know, take the model and adapt it and create their own initiatives. The Appalachian Trail Conservancy was first. In fact, they were sort of thinking about doing something like this already whenever we started our program. And you know, these are the marks of some of the other early programs. There certainly are a lot more than this, but these were just some of the first ones. By now, you know, we're now like 15 years into trail towns. I consider there to be two different models. There's the first model, which, like along the Great Allegheny Passage, it's trail specific. There's a program that's created that is centered on a single trail, like the Gap or like the Appalachian Trail. A second model is that a state agency creates a program and makes that program accessible to communities throughout the state. Kentucky did a program first, and Florida and Michigan have created programs in recent years. So a few things, these are the questions that always come up whenever I talk about trail towns. If you are thinking about taking advantage of this approach to community development and better connecting to your trails, you should know that there is no national or international certification body or approval process. It's just people take the idea and they apply it at home, right? So therefore, there's no barrier to entry. You basically learn from what programs are out there and you create your own program, unless there is one that already exists in your area. For example, if you're a New Jersey community along the Appalachian Trail, you of course are going to want to apply for designation through their program rather than doing your own thing. So regional approach is always best. It's just, you know, I saw some of the questions some of you were sending in ahead of the summit, and there were questions about funding. Funders love this. They love a regional approach, whether it's to trail towns, whether it's to building out trail networks. You know, regional cooperation is always highly appreciated by funders. So the last thing here I would say is you don't need a designation to think and act like a trail town, which actually brings me to if there's one thing you remember from this section of the presentation, it's exactly that. You don't need a designation, or you don't need to create a complicated program to espouse the characteristics of being a trail town or of a trail community. You sometimes just need to get started in doing things that are trail friendly in order to celebrate and invest in your trails. And when you do, it makes life better for local residents. Some of these things are great for visiting trail users, but at the end of the day, what we want is improved quality of life for local residents, and all of the kinds of things that come up in trail towns typically do improve that quality of life. So one thing that I noticed over the years with trail towns being spread across the country is an overemphasis on economic development. I'm not naive. I know how important the economic piece is. It's the hook that, you know, catches people's interest, including our decision makers. But I have found there to be an imbalance. And because of that imbalance, I think there's a lot missing from trail towns. I think a lot of communities were really not getting the most important piece, which was that cultural piece, that cultural shift from people not really valuing trails to people appreciating and celebrating and investing in them. And that's a large part of why I wrote Deciding on Trails. The book starts with the history of trail towns and how it's been applied in different places. And then what I do is I get into what I consider to be 7 best practices of healthy trail communities. So you can get the book anywhere that books are sold, but I also wanted to let you know I have a coupon code going if you're interested. It's TrailFriend21, and you can get that on my website if you have been interested in the book. So I wanted to just show you 3 of those 7 practices very quickly. The first one is to physically connect trail to town. This is where I think a lot of trail town conversations are centered. I think people are thinking about infrastructure and thinking about improvements that will make it easier for people to move between trail and town. This is where you see things like bike lanes and improved sidewalks and directional signage and art. Art is really does some of the heavy lifting of pulling people toward a community. If you place interesting public art someplace where it can be seen from a trailhead, and it's starting to it's between the trail and your community, it does some of that work of luring people into town. Another best practice is to extend an invitation to trail users into your community, and more importantly is to extend an invitation for your local community residents to go out to your trails. And this is assuming if you have multi-use or rail trails, a lot of times they're a little bit removed from the community, and you have to find ways of getting people between the two. But it's so important. I mean, this is the stuff of hospitality, and we have to invite people into our community and trail spaces. Sometimes it's through signs. Sometimes it's something as simple as sidewalk chalk. This photo on the right is of a high school student who we engaged along the gap recently to do a welcome message using chalk art. So it doesn't always have to be complicated. Laura could tell you that tactical urbanism is really effective in bringing about change in communities, and that approach to placemaking usually is about things that you can do quickly and easily to show that there is a pulse to this place. And there are people that care about this community. It's a vibrant community, and we are making change. And the last one I wanted to mention here was to cultivate a trail culture. Of all of the best practices, this is sort of like the bedrock, right? All of the other practices are built upon this idea of fostering and cultivating a cultural shift in our communities. And people sometimes ask me about, well, how do you know whether you have a trail culture? And I point them to this storefront in rural Pennsylvania. I was in the town of Franklin, Pennsylvania a few years ago, and I saw this yarn bike in the window of the local yarn shop. And this woman, she did the bike. She has the trail brochures, the tennis shoes, the sign directing people to the trail. She had no business reason to do this storefront, but she is a part of a culture in that community that appreciates trails, and it comes through so loud and clear. So I think I'm going to be running short on time here, but I did want to just say a few things about regional trail networks. As great as it is to do things in your community, to build your piece of trail, to maintain it, to help your community to better connect to it. I think the place we were headed in trails is around regional trail networks, around building longer trails and connecting them to each other. So there's one in Western Pennsylvania that I've been involved in for a long time. It's called the Industrial Heartlands Coalition, Trails Coalition. I think the website is ihearttrails.org, if someone wants to drop that in the chat. But this is a four-state regional network trying to build out a network of 1,500 miles. I think we're about halfway right now. And it provides some really good examples of a multi-state effort and the effort to try to connect trails and to build them. And there are some good resources at that website. Some of you have been asking about how do you convince your decision makers? How do you convince your community about trails? I would encourage you to go look at that last bullet point. There's a video called The Heart of Our Community. And, videos like that, stories of what trails mean to people and successes around trails, I think are always inspiring and always useful. I think you all are familiar with the circuit trails. That's the two-state network in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. That's another great example. You probably also are familiar with the Rails to Trails Conservancy's Trail Nation effort. That's a great resource for you to look into if you haven't already. But one thing I wanted to point out was the circuit trails were mentioned in the latest issue of Outside Magazine. I don't know if anyone saw this or not, but Philadelphia was named one of their best towns for 2021. And make of lists like this what you will, but it was fun to see Philadelphia there, and the circuit trails being one of the reasons. And I also wanted to point out that this year they built their list based on communities that were doing good things in the realm of sustainability, affordability, and outdoor equity. And that's a good shift to be seeing taking place. So just to close out here, do individuals and regions and entire states need permission to thrive? Of course not. But I hope you do know that you have permission to thrive even in this time of COVID. And I hope that, and I think that it sounds like you're moving in that direction and recognize that trails and active transportation are a part of that recipe for healthy communities and regions. In terms of vital and resilient communities, I think this is common language for a lot of you, but just know that communities that are vital and resilient are able to sustain themselves. They solve problems. They create environments in which residents can experience positive life outcomes. And I think that one is just so critical. And they have the ability to adapt and transform. If you don't know the community heart and soul approach, to community development. That's just one I wanted to throw out here. I just really love what they stand for and how they do it. Their 3 tenets of their work is to involve everyone, focus on what matters, and to play the long game. And I think that's something that we all can be doing. Speaking of transportation, I have a train that's about to pass my house. So last thing here, I want to tie it back to the beginning. This is the World Turned Upside Down sculpture in London. And our world has indeed turned upside down. I think, probably most of us don't want to go back to the world that we have before, but we want to be thinking about what can we go back to and what can we make better. And I am very encouraged to hear what a wonderful summit you've had. And it sounds like you all are working very hard to create that, new world for New Jersey. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Amy. I always enjoy hearing you speak.
Thanks, Laura.
So, does anybody have any questions for Amy about her work or comments about your experiences that related to anything that Amy talked about? But to get us started, Amy, I was jotting down a couple ideas here myself. Well, first, are there any, one of the questions that came in from Andy was, are there any New Jersey trail towns? I don't think the Trail Towns program has made it here to our state. Do you know of any?
Well, the one thing that may exist, the Appalachian Trail Community Program, there may be designated New Jersey communities, there probably are, but I am not aware of any other trail town initiatives in the state.
Because I really loved what you were talking about, how we can look at it as either trail specific, which is more of like a network or a length, and a coalition around that trail and how towns can get on board around that, or either a local program, a local community wanting to have a trail culture, or a state program. I have to bring up, New Jersey is what's called a home rule state. You know, every one of our municipalities is incorporated and they all, you know, are in charge of their space. And one of the biggest hurdles we have in New Jersey with doing regional projects like this is getting all the towns on board. Can you talk anything? Can you talk about that at all in your experience of multiple towns and kind of getting multiple towns to be on the same page around a trail culture?
Yeah, you know, honestly, it's not easy, right? A lot of communities are not used to thinking about the community next to them or a community 50 miles down the trail. You know, they're just doing the best that they can to make their community the best that they can. But whenever, I think it helps to have some kind of like a regional entity that is bringing communities together. Trail towns tends to be something that they're, you know, it needs to be someone's day job to be connecting the dots and to connecting the communities. A lot of trail towns are located along rail trails. The railroads, you know, historically have not brought communities together, but now trails can. And a lot of the time it has to do with business leaders, business owners who understand and to, you know, tourism advocates that understand that trail users and visitors do not recognize municipal lines. They don't recognize county or state lines. You know, but if you have a community of people along the same trail that come together and try to build up that system and improve the types of services it offers in the interest of tourism, you know, it becomes more possible. You know, businesses and townspeople, you know, leaders that are involved in trails want to get to know each other if you create the opportunity for them to do so. That's kind of a long-winded answer, but you know, it takes work, it takes effort. But then, you know, sometimes like along the Great Allegheny Passage, I saw recently that the town of Connellsville and the town of Myersdale had, it wasn't the municipalities leading this, but it was nonprofits in those organizations that hold monthly business meetings. You know, the Connellsville people were invited over to Myersdale to have an exchange, and they are located probably 50 miles apart. And I think that's pretty remarkable when you see that kind of thing happening.
Yeah. I'm getting a couple in the question box. I'm getting a couple answers actually.
Good.
I learned that Blairstown is a designated Appalachian Trail community in New Jersey.
Okay.
And let's see, Richard says maybe we could start a trail town. Lawrenceville, where I live, has some trails itself. So people are getting jazzed. Julie says, your talk helped me feel that we can start small. It doesn't have to be a big thing. We can start small and be very grassroots about it. Oh, and here Julie says, I'm a grassroots advocate for a town trail. So really great. Let's see. I have a question about, oh, and they also named some other towns, New Brunswick and South Bound Brook. So people are thinking like, there's lots of opportunity here in New Jersey for trail towns. Now, if you know our state at all, we're small state, but we have a range of geographic features. We have very, very rural north and south areas. We have very suburban areas, and we have some very, very densely urban areas. And our trail networks and ecotourism in general really does traverse all of these different types of environments. Can you talk a little bit about how trail towns are either similar or different in the different types of communities that you worked with?
Yeah, so when we started along the Gap, I mean, we were working with mostly rural communities with populations fewer than 10,000, right? A lot of like 700, 800, 2,000 people, you know, so these were really small towns. But the program, you know, of course, like the idea has been exported all around the country. And in Florida, for example, I know that they have communities that have populations of 200, 300,000. So, you know, you can take the idea and apply it in different settings. I think sometimes in bigger cities, it's a little bit harder because there's so many other things happening. There might be just like a little bit less hunger for something like this. You know, so I that's why it tends to work really well in smaller communities and suburban areas. But we know from Florida, we know from some of the towns in Ohio that other larger communities are doing it. I think it really comes down to people being hungry for change and improvement, and recognizing that trails are a part of that, just a part of it. You know, they don't fix communities, but they do make life better. So it's something that can be done in all sorts of settings.
I think it's also really incredible. You know, the last year and a half have been hard. And for those of us who are active transportation, placemaking, trails advocates, we've been saying things for years, and we feel pushback from communities because they don't, you know, for whatever reason, they feel like we're outsiders maybe, or we don't understand, we're not listening to their values or whatever. But during COVID, during the lockdown, we started doing all the things that we've been talking about. You know, we closed streets to cars and opened them to people, and we dined outside, and we used the trails like we were talking about. So it feels like we're in a new world right now in terms of addressing fears and possible pushback. One of the questions that just came up from Corey is that, what are the biggest barriers to starting a regional trail town project? And I think in the before times, before COVID, overcoming barriers might have been different than they are now. Like, how can we start to use this current time to address barriers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's recognizing and verbalizing that a whole lot of us don't want to go back to the way that life was before. You know, we're looking for a new way, and we saw evidence of that. Like you said, how quickly communities mobilized to close down streets and open them up to pedestrians and cyclists. Like, that was awesome. We can do this. And, you know, to answer the barriers question, I mean, I think the biggest barrier is, you know, for a regional program or a statewide program is whoever's thinking about doing it, getting their arms around it and figuring out how to do it. You know, what organization or entity will house the program, raising the funds, you know, and figuring out how to create and sustain a program. It's not necessarily easy, but it can be done. It's been done in at least, you know, 28 states. You know, I know we're about out of time, Laura, but one thing I just wanted to say, I think it was Julie who said she's feeling a little bit, I might be putting words in her mouth, but just maybe feeling less overwhelmed and knowing you don't have to build out a full program. You can just start doing some of the things to become more trail friendly and to celebrate the trails that you do have.
Yeah, a group of people, small group of people with some sidewalk chop can make a big difference.
That's right.
Well, Amy, thank you so much. We are out of time. I do want to also say that the questions that are coming in, a lot of them are comments, and people are like typing in different towns that might become trail towns. You know? So it seems like there's a little bit of excitement and a lot of potential candidates. So I want to thank everyone for participating in this session, for all your questions. Big thank you to you, Amy. It's really a pleasure to see you and hear you speak. I feel very honored.
Likewise.
Thank you very much. And right now we're going to turn it back over to Sonia and Leanne.
Thank you so much, Lauren, Amy. That was a really fantastic, inspiring session. I would like to think we can end this whole summit with a permission to thrive in our own communities, create connections through creating things like trail towns, and work together to build better, healthier communities across New Jersey. I also would like to extend, I think, one more time, a big thank you to our excellent panelists and keynote speakers over the past 2 days. I mean, I learned so much, and I hope everyone else did too. I know you heard this at the end of each session, but why not repeat it as a reminder? All these sessions are recorded and they'll be available post-summit on the NJTrailsAction.org website. Just give us a little time to clean them up before you see them posted there over the next few days. And most of you, I hope, at the end of each panel session, you saw a little pop-up box come up to ask you to complete a short questionnaire. Thank you for taking the time to give us your valuable feedback. At the end of this session, since we're at the end of the closing keynote, we're going to send a slightly different questionnaire out to you to get feedback on the entire summit and not just each session. So if you would just take one more time to answer that little pop-up box and follow it to our full summit survey, we really do appreciate and value your feedback. So on that note, Sonia.
Yeah, thanks, Leanne. So this summit would really not have happened without the determination, dedication, commitment, and skill of so many different partners coming together. So thank you all for making this happen. It was your vision and tireless efforts and long hours of hard work that truly made this summit a success. Today, trails in New Jersey have taken a huge step forward because of your work. I know probably many of you are feeling antsy from 2 days of Zoom sessions, so I invite you all out to a number of trail rides and walks hosted by members of the planning committee that are happening from tomorrow to Sunday. I just put the link in the chat for everyone, but information on that can also be found on NJTrailsAction.org website under upcoming events. So join us in a short period of time at 5:30 for keeping the conversation going, how to stay in touch post-summit. That link is actually a separate Zoom, but you could find it in the feed loop schedule. So you'll go to that panel and you'll click on the link and it'll bring you to a Zoom webinar. But we promise it'll be fun. We'll talk about what's important to you for building and supporting more trail and greenways work in the state and how to get involved in the New Jersey Trails Action Network. So grab a drink, and meet us there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.